It's on the eastern side of the ranges and in the foothills of Kurrajong and those places, and in those foothills where it's the flats of the Richmond River, and then these are the foothills above it. So it's undulating country. It's not the rich river flats, but it's undulating country just before the start of the dividing range, below Kurrajong. It was all cleared. The land, Yobarnie, was all cleared originally, so there was only scattered trees around. It was a grazing property, basically. And when my father purchased it, it was just a grazing property, but the grasses were very high, not very nutritional type grasses, but very high, scarcely much timber at all, and he then put in a few dams. But the original property was just almost a big paddock.
It was a deceased estate, badly eroded, rabbits everywhere, erosion everywhere, just a ghastly place. And he only wanted to get Yobarnie. And I said, no, you've got to buy both. Or you can't. So he offered them less money. And they said, yep, okay, we'll take that for both. So he bought into those properties.
In those days, taxation was a mad problem. But there was a sort of a loophole in the system which everybody involved in agriculture, or people in the city, would buy it because of the advantage of owning a farm and developing it. So he knew nothing about agriculture to start with. His background was mining. So he bought it in the early 40s really as a taxation type thing. And then later, the fascination of the land and the development of it became his interest, and in turn mine.
He was a very successful open cut coal miner, made big contracts, and a seam of coal gets deeper as you go, and he knew to start at the bottom of the seam of coal and work his way up, because if he got a lot of rain, he would be flooded out. But that was the more expensive way of doing the operation. But it was a really wet year, 1950-something, early 50s, and all the mines were shutting down because they were filling in with water, and his was the only one. I think he said, remember him saying they only lost a half a day's production, and they were supplying the only coal to Sydney.
Yobarnie was where all the ideas developed, and the Allan actually became the property where they were implemented as if he was a consultant walking onto virgin country and developing that country. So it was classic all the way through, but it was, the ideas all came from Yobarnie. What originally happened was that the property was laid out according to the Soil Conservation Service and used all their techniques, and drains were put in. That's on Yobarnie. And drains were put in, and none of that worked. And my father's one really cute thing about his background was his knowledge of moving water, because he was a mining engineer. And since time, thousands of years ago, the problem of producing gold was not getting the gold, it was getting the water to the gold. And contour drains would be laid around the mountains, all through miles and miles, to find the little gold patch. So he applied those techniques for developing the property and putting the dams in and where they should go. And then eventually the concept of Keyline, or that one particular contour line on which everything could be based, was a discovery that came much later, probably in the 50s, because for a long period he really didn't do a lot on the farm except conventional stuff.
But he wanted to do something really beautiful on the property, and soil conservation had been developed in the US, was coming into Australia, and he was probably one of the first to try it, and he had the mapping and the new landscapes and water control, and he came to the conclusion that designing the farm to safely dispose of all the water from it didn't make any sense. And then there was a point where, when he was with my brother Neville, apparently, so Nev was saying, he saw a shape pattern in the landscape, and that pattern enabled him to solve the problem of how to hold the water on the landscape. 58, there's photographs in the Challenge of Landscape with coach loads of people coming on to see this amazing property and looking at the soil that used to be thin and shallow and shaly, and it's now full of earthworms. And I've seen video of earthworms, going out like this long. So bring it all to life and make it fertile, and we can all live in abundance.